I bought my first home without telling my family. 3 weeks later, I walked in and found my sister's entire family unpacking their suitcases in my living room. My name is Bethany. I am 32, and I live in Colorado, where the air is thin and the winters are honest about what they are. I work in data analytics for a mid-sized company in Denver, the kind of job that looks boring on paper but pays steadily if you keep your head down. I have no kids, no spouse, and no interest in turning my life into a group project. I wanted a place that was mine, quiet, small, and safe. I wanted a front porch where I could drink coffee without hearing someone sigh like my peace was an inconvenience. I learned early that my peace was never the priority. My older sister, Lauren, has always been the priority. She is 3 years older, the kind of person who smiles at strangers like she is collecting them. Growing up, she was the sun, and I was the reliable weather underneath it. Her birthdays were backyard events with rented games and a table full of gifts. Mine were pizza on paper plates and a grocery store cake with my name spelled right only after my mother corrected it. At Christmas, Lauren got the brand new dollhouse with working lights. I got a used one with a door that never closed. When I noticed, my parents would pat my shoulder and tell me to be grateful, like gratitude was my assigned role in the family. The unfairness sharpened when college started. I earned my way into a local university and planned to commute to save money. Lauren went out of state to her dream school, and my parents covered tuition, housing, and the little extras that make life feel easy. When I asked what support looked like for me, my mother said that if I stayed at home, I needed to contribute. Contribute meant $400 a month for rent and utilities, plus my own groceries. I was 18, working part-time for $9 an hour, and suddenly my childhood bedroom came with a bill attached to it. My parents called it responsibility. I called it a message. So I became the kind of responsible that hurts. I picked up extra shifts, skipped meals, bought used textbooks, and drank free break room coffee while other students carried warm lattes across campus. I handed my parents cash each month while I overheard them talking about how they did not want Lauren to struggle. I listened from the kitchen, holding instant noodles, and I understood something that never left me. In our family, being capable was not praised. It was harvested. After graduation, I moved out fast. I built a life with tight budgets and careful savings. I stopped sharing my plans because my plans always became her plans. That is why I bought my house in silence. I thought silence would protect it. I did not realize my family had already decided who my home was for. I did not buy that house to impress anyone. I bought it because I was tired of paying rent for a place that felt like it could be taken away with one bad lease renewal. I bought it because I wanted roots that no one else could tug on. The funny thing is, my family always told me I was the independent one, the self-starter, the one who did not need help. They said it like a compliment, but it was always a way to step back and let me drown quietly while they threw life rafts at Lauren. When I was a kid, I thought the difference between us was just personality. Lauren was loud and charming. I was quieter and serious. Adults love a kid who makes them laugh, who hugs them without being asked, who says the right thing at the right time. Lauren could do that in her sleep. I was the kid who made sure homework was done, who packed my own lunch, who remembered deadlines. You would think that would earn trust. In my house, it earned expectations. In high school, I loaded my schedule with the hardest classes I could handle, not because I enjoyed suffering, but because I thought achievement would finally make me visible. I stayed late for clubs, helped teachers organize events, and took on extra projects when other students vanished the second the bell rang. At night, I sat at my desk with a cheap lamp and a notebook full of plans. I told myself that college would be my clean start. I would be the first in the room, the last to leave. I would build something so solid that even my parents would have to admit I mattered. Lauren was already in college by then, off at her dream school in another state. My parents talked about her like she was a celebrity. They kept her framed photos on the mantle, her freshman orientation badge stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. When she called, my mother would lower her voice and step into the hallway like she was taking a sacred call. I would hear words like stress, pressure, and workload. I would hear how hard Lauren worked, how much she deserved a break, and I would hear the part that always landed like a quiet slap. We do not want her to struggle. The summer before my freshman year, I sat at the kitchen table with a folder of acceptance papers and scholarship forms. I had chosen a university close to home because it made sense. I could commute, keep costs down, maybe graduate with less debt. I explained it carefully, like a presentation. My father nodded but did not look impressed. My mother listened with a tight smile, as if my plan was a minor inconvenience. I asked, as calmly as I could, what support would look like for me. Tuition help. Books? Anything. I did not ask for a free ride. I asked for fairness. My mother blinked like she was surprised I had needs at all. "If you are staying here, you will need to contribute," she said, like she was reading a rule off a sign. I asked what contribute meant. She said $400 a month for rent and utilities. Groceries were on me. I remember the exact way my throat tightened, like my body tried to swallow the shock before my brain could process it. I reminded her that Lauren lived away at school, and they covered everything. My mother did not deny it. She just tilted her head and said Lauren earned it. Lauren deserved it. "You are different, Bethany. You are independent. You will figure it out." Independent? The word sounded like a door locking. $400 a month might not sound like a lot to adults with full-time jobs. To an 18-year-old working part-time, it was a cliff edge. I found a job at a small retail store in a strip mall. The pay was not good. The schedule was worse. I worked evenings and weekends, then woke up early to drive to campus in a car that rattled like it was held together by hope. I learned which gas stations had the cheapest prices and which grocery stores marked down bread at night. I stopped buying things that made me feel like a normal student. I did not grab coffee on campus. I did not go to late-night food runs. I did not buy new clothes for presentations. I packed peanut butter sandwiches and ate them in the library while other students laughed with warm cups in their hands. I borrowed textbooks when I could, bought used copies when I had to, and sometimes I just prayed the professor would not assign a chapter that was locked behind an online code. Every month I handed my parents the $400. I handed it over with a smile so they would not call me dramatic. My mother would accept it like it was proof of good parenting. My father would say, "Good, you are learning." No one ever asked if I was okay. Meanwhile, Lauren called from her campus apartment, complaining that her roommates were messy or the air conditioning was too weak. She would laugh about how exhausting it was to juggle her classes and social life. My mother would coo into the phone and promise to send money. I once overheard her say, "We do not want her to struggle. College is hard enough." I was standing behind her, holding instant noodles, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I was struggling, and it did not count because I was quiet about it. I did well in school anyway. I had to. Failure would have been used as proof that they were right about me. I lived with a constant hum of pressure, like a fluorescent light that never stopped buzzing. I studied until my eyes burned, then went to work and stood on my feet until my back ached. Sometimes I got home late and sat in the dark of my room, staring at my bank app, doing the same math over and over like it might change if I stared harder. The worst part was how normal it became, how quickly my family treated my exhaustion like background noise. When I got a high grade, it was expected. When Lauren got a decent grade, it was celebrated. When I made a sacrifice, it was called responsibility. When Lauren needed help, it was called love. By the time I graduated, I had a degree that could have made them proud, and a heart that already knew pride was not what they offered me. The night before my graduation, my mother asked what time the ceremony was, not because she was excited, but because she wanted to plan dinner afterward. I looked at her and realized that, no matter how far I ran, I would always be the one they leaned on without ever lifting. That is what my house was supposed to change. I thought distance and silence could finally build a wall. I did not know my family had been practicing how to climb over it for years. College did not feel like freedom to me. It felt like a test I was never allowed to fail. Every morning, I drove across town before sunrise, my windshield fogged from the cold, my coffee a bitter blend I made at home because buying it on campus felt irresponsible. I parked in the farthest lot because it was cheaper, then walked past students who looked rested, relaxed, and unburdened in a way I never learned how to be. I was already carrying rent in my head before my first class even started. My schedule was packed tight, classes during the day, work in the evenings. Weekends were not for rest. They were for extra shifts. I worked retail at first, then picked up freelance tech work when I could, teaching myself skills late at night because no one was going to invest in me if I did not invest in myself. I learned to function on less sleep than my body wanted and more stress than it could comfortably hold. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it would be worth it. At home, nothing changed except the expectations. My parents did not see a student trying to survive. They saw a tenant who needed to pay on time. Every month, like clockwork, I handed over $400. Cash. My mother preferred cash. She would count it carefully, tuck it into her purse, and nod like a manager approving a transaction. Sometimes she would say, "Good job." Sometimes she would say, "This is how the real world works." She never asked how many hours I worked to make that money. I bought my own groceries and learned which meals could stretch for days. Rice, eggs, peanut butter. whatever was cheap and filling. I did not complain because complaining only made things worse. My parents had a way of reframing my pain into a lesson. If I was tired, I needed better time management. If I was stressed, I needed thicker skin. If I was overwhelmed, that was just adulthood arriving early. Lauren, meanwhile, floated through her college years like someone protected by an invisible net. She lived in a nice apartment near campus. My parents paid her rent. They sent money for groceries. They covered books without blinking. When she called home, it was always about how busy she was, how hard her classes felt, how much pressure she was under. My mother listened with sympathy that bordered on reverence. She offered solutions. She offered reassurance. She offered money. I once overheard my mother telling a friend that Lauren was working so hard and that they did not want her to struggle. The word struggle hit me like a quiet insult. I was struggling. I was struggling every day. But my struggle was invisible because I did not package it in a way that made people feel needed. There were moments when the unfairness felt so sharp it made my hands shake. Like the time Lauren complained about her car needing repairs and my parents immediately offered to help her buy a new one. I was driving a car without air conditioning in the middle of summer, the windows down, sweat sticking my shirt to my back. I did not mention it. I did not want to hear another speech about independence. I learned quickly that success was the only acceptable emotion for me. If I did well, it was expected. If I struggled, it was inconvenient. I could not be weak. I could not be needy. Those roles were already filled, so I became efficient. I learned how to say no to things that made me happy and yes to things that kept me afloat. I skipped social events. I left campus early. I studied alone. I built my life in quiet increments, never asking for applause because I knew it would not come. When graduation approached, I felt more relief than pride. I had survived something no one acknowledged. I graduated with honors, a degree in a field that promised stability, and a resume built on exhaustion. My parents attended the ceremony, but it felt procedural. My mother asked where we were going to eat afterward. My father checked his watch. There was no party, no banners, no speeches about how proud they were. My mother made dinner at home and said she did not want to make a fuss. I sat at the table, diploma still warm in my hands, and realized something that hurt more than the money ever did. My achievements did not inspire joy in them. They inspired comfort. Comfort that they did not need to worry about me. Lauren's graduation, a year later, was a completely different event. There was a venue, a catered buffet, extended family, photos everywhere. My parents beamed like they were accepting an award. I stood in the corner, clapping politely, feeling like a guest at someone else's celebration. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not anger, not jealousy. Something colder and clearer. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped hoping for balance. I stopped waiting for them to notice me. I understood that in our family, I was not the one who would be lifted. I was the one who was supposed to hold things up quietly. After graduation, I moved out as soon as I could. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I worked, saved, and kept my life deliberately small. I shared less with my family because every detail became a tool. If they knew too much, it stopped being mine. That is how I learned to survive. Alone, carefully, without backup. And that is why, years later, when I started thinking about buying a house, I did not tell a single one of them. I already knew what would happen if I did. I did not wake up one day and decide to buy a house. It crept up on me slowly, the way real decisions do. First, it was the rent increase notice taped to my apartment door. Then it was the realization that I had lived in that same cramped place for years, pouring money into something that never felt secure. Then it was the quiet thought I barely let myself finish. I could actually do this. I ran the numbers obsessively. I checked my savings late at night, the glow of my phone lighting up the ceiling while the city outside went quiet. I had been careful for so long that the math finally worked in my favor. I had no debt beyond what I could manage. I had a steady income. I had discipline. I did not have a safety net, but I never had. That had never stopped me before. I told no one, not because I wanted to be secretive, but because experience taught me that sharing turned into surrender. Any plan I mentioned stopped being mine. It became a discussion, a suggestion, a family matter. I wanted this to belong to me from start to finish. I started browsing listings after work, scrolling through photos of places that felt real but unreachable. Big houses made me nervous. I did not want echoes. I did not want empty rooms waiting to be filled by expectations. I wanted something small, something that matched the life I actually lived. 2 bedrooms, a porch, a yard I could take care of without help. While I was quietly moving forward, Life around me continued the way it always had. My sister, Lauren, was struggling again. That was how everyone framed it. She and her husband lived in a small apartment with their 3 kids. He bounced between jobs. She complained constantly about space, about noise, about how hard it was to manage everything. My parents stepped in, as they always did. Money here, babysitting there, weekend help, emergency funds. I heard about it in passing, through comments dropped into conversations like background noise. I kept my responses neutral. I did not offer opinions. I did not offer help. I had learned that any engagement only reinforced the idea that I was part of the solution to problems I did not create. The house search stayed quiet until it did not. Someone at work mentioned it casually. I did not think much of it at the time. Colorado is smaller than people think. News travels sideways. Within a week, my phone rang. My mother sounded cheerful in a way that made my shoulders tense. She asked why I had not told her I was looking at houses. I played it down. I said I was just browsing. Nothing serious. I could feel the conversation shifting before she even finished her sentence. She said she and Lauren had been talking. She said they had ideas. She said if I was going to buy, I needed to think big. She said I would need enough space for everyone. She talked about bedrooms, schools, proximity. She spoke like the decision was already half made. I hung up with a polite excuse and sat in my car staring at the steering wheel. The pattern was too familiar. Something that belonged to me was already being reimagined as a resource for the family. The messages started almost immediately. Listings filled my phone. Large houses, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, places with pools and finished basements. Every suggestion came with commentary that had nothing to do with me. The kids would love this. Your brother-in-law could set up an office here. There is a guest room for us when we visit. I tried at first to redirect. I said I was looking for something small. I said I did not need that much space. My words landed like suggestions, not boundaries. The more I resisted, the more they pushed. That was when I stopped responding. I muted the messages. I focused on my own search. I avoided neighborhoods near my sister. I scheduled viewings on my lunch break and weekends, alone. I let myself imagine a life that did not revolve around managing other people's expectations. Then I found it. A small cottage just outside the city. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with sunlight that made the counters glow. A porch that felt like it was waiting for someone to sit and breathe. The backyard was not big, but it was enough. Enough for a garden. Enough for quiet. Enough for me. The moment I walked in, something in my chest loosened. I did not feel anxious. I did not feel rushed. I felt grounded. I made an offer. I waited through the longest days of my adult life. When the offer was accepted, I sat on my apartment floor and cried in a way that surprised me. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I had done something entirely on my own. I did not tell my family. I let them keep sending listings. I let them keep planning. I told myself I would deal with it when the time came. I wanted one thing that existed without their fingerprints on it. The time came sooner than I expected. My parents invited me to dinner. I almost declined. Something told me this was not a casual invitation. I went anyway, knowing that avoidance had only ever delayed the inevitable. The house was loud when I arrived. My sister children were everywhere. Her husband sat on the couch like he belonged there. Dinner was loud and chaotic. Complaints flowed freely. About space. About money. About stress. Then my mother cleared her throat. She smiled. She announced that they had found the perfect house for me. She described it in detail. 5 bedrooms. Big yard. Close to my sister. Perfect for everyone. I listened. I let her finish. I set my fork down. I said I had already bought a house. The silence that followed felt heavy. My sister stared at me like I had broken an unspoken rule. My mother demanded to know what I meant. I explained calmly. 2 bedrooms, just outside the city. Perfect for me. That was when the tone changed. The disbelief, the anger, the accusations. They asked how I could make such a decision without consulting them. They asked how my sister family was supposed to fit. I stood up. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. I told them it was my house. I told them I bought it for myself. I told them their plans were never my responsibility. The room exploded. Tears, shouting, words like selfish and ungrateful. I left without apologizing. I drove home shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that saying no had finally happened out loud. I did not know yet how far they would push back. I only knew they would. I thought walking out of that dinner would be the worst part. I was wrong. That night was only the opening door. The first message came before I even made it home. My sister sent a photo of her kids sitting on the floor of their apartment, toys scattered everywhere. Her caption carefully chosen to bruise instead of argue. Look how cramped they are. Is this fair to them? I stared at my phone at a red light, my hands tight around the steering wheel. It was the oldest trick in our family. If logic failed, they sent guilt wrapped in small human faces. I did not reply. I went home, locked my door, and tried to breathe. By morning, my phone was a disaster. Missed calls, long texts, voicemails I did not listen to because I already knew what they would say. My mother accused me of being cold. My father accused me of tearing the family apart. My sister accused me of changing, like growth was a betrayal. They spoke like my house was already half theirs and I had stolen it back. I muted them. I told myself it would calm down if I did not engage. It only escalated. They recruited help. An aunt I barely spoke to called me to remind me that family comes first. A cousin sent a message about how hard my sister had it. None of them mentioned my name without attaching it to disappointment. I realized how quickly a narrative forms when only one side is allowed to speak. Then it moved online. My sister posted a photo of her kids sharing a bunk bed, framed just right to look tragic. She wrote about space and sacrifice and how some people forget what family means. People commented with sympathy and anger aimed at a villain they could not see but already hated. I said nothing. Defending myself would have made me look cruel. Silence was safer, even when it burned. My mother followed up with her own post. She shared a photo of my house. I still do not know how she got it. She wrote about sacrifices parents make, and how heartbreaking it is when children forget where they come from. I blocked them both immediately, but not before a coworker messaged me asking if everything was okay. That was when I realized the damage was not contained to my family anymore. I changed my number. I blocked anyone remotely connected to them. I tightened my privacy settings until my online presence felt like a locked room. For a few days, the silence was almost peaceful. I slept better. I started to believe that maybe this was the end of it. Then my sister showed up at my door. She stood there with one child on her hip and the others clinging to her legs, looking exhausted in a way that felt rehearsed. She said they had nowhere else to go. She said rent was going up. She said the kids needed stability. She said just for a little while. I did not invite her in. I stood in the doorway and felt my heart split between instinct and survival. I told her no. I told her my house was not an option. I told her this was not my responsibility. Her face hardened like I had confirmed something she always believed about me. My mother called the next morning to tell me I was heartless. I hung up without explaining. I thought that was the boundary. I was wrong again. The following weekend, I ran errands in the morning. When I pulled into my driveway, my sister's SUV was parked in front of my house. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. I unlocked the door and heard voices inside. Children laughing, cabinets opening. They were in my house. My sister was rearranging furniture like she had always belonged there. Her husband was in my kitchen, eating my food. The kids were everywhere, touching things I had chosen carefully, like my space was a suggestion instead of a fact. She told me our mother gave her the spare key. She said it would be easier if they just moved in. She said I did not need all this space anyway. Her husband said it made more sense for them. I did not argue. I called the police. The officers arrived quickly. My sister cried. Her husband complained. They said family should not need permission. The officers did not care. They told them they were trespassing and needed to leave. I stood there, shaking, but silent, watching my sister pack up her entitlement in grocery bags. One of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. I just wanted them gone. After they left, my house felt different, like a place that had been touched without consent. I changed the locks that afternoon. I installed cameras the next day. I called a lawyer and had formal letters sent to everyone involved. Cease and desist. Clear. Final. I sat alone that night, on my couch, in my house, and felt something settle in my chest. Not guilt. Not relief. Something steadier. Clarity. They had never wanted my success. They wanted access. After the locks were changed and the cameras were installed, my house finally sounded the way I imagined it would. Quiet. Not the awkward quiet of avoidance, but the steady kind that lets your shoulders drop. I sat on the floor the first night because my couch still felt unfamiliar after everything that had happened. The walls did not judge me. The windows did not ask for explanations. For the first time, nothing in my space demanded that I shrink to make room for someone else's comfort. I did grieve. Not the relationship I had with my family, because I had already learned to survive without that. I grieved the idea that things could have been different. I grieved the version of parents who might have said they were proud without adding conditions. I grieved the sister I never really had, only managed. That grief came in waves, usually late at night, when there was no one left to disappoint. But something else came too. Relief, the kind that settles deep and does not ask permission. I realized that my family never struggled with my independence. They struggled with the fact that they could not control it. As long as I stayed small, quiet, and available, I was useful. The moment I built something they could not claim, they panicked. They called it selfishness because entitlement sounds uglier out loud. I replayed the moment I called the police more times than I care to admit. Not because I regretted it, but because it marked a line I never crossed before. I had been trained my whole life to absorb discomfort so others could stay comfortable. That day, I chose the opposite. I chose safety over silence. I chose law over loyalty. And yes, I chose myself. Some people will always say family is everything. I used to believe that too. Now I believe family should not require self-erasure as proof of love. Family should not need keys to your home to feel important. Family should not demand your future as rent for your past. I still live alone. I still drink my coffee on the porch in the mornings. I planted lavender in the backyard and this time it lived. I sleep better than I ever did before, not because life is easier, but because it is honest. My phone stays quiet. My space stays mine. I do not know if my parents will ever understand what they did. I do not know if my sister will ever see me as anything other than a resource she lost access to. I have stopped needing those answers. Closure is not something they can give me. It is something I built, one boundary at a time. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had given in. If I had let them move in. If I had swallowed the resentment and told myself it was temporary. Then I look around my house and I know exactly what would have happened. I would have disappeared. Again. So here is my question for you. If your family crossed every line and called it love, would you still open the door? Or would you finally lock it and keep the key?